Is there any point where you almost feel like your whole life achievements are overshadowed by one moment?
And here comes Hurst. He's got some people are on the pitch. They think it's all over. It is now. It's four. And Hurst.
After the game, it becomes a bit of a blur. In fact, you're almost sort of deflated in a way that you're on that high. When you look back and thinking what you've done, and signing on the dole, it was going to be quite difficult and quite hurtful.
You lost your younger brother when he took his own life in his mid-20s.
And certainly in the time my brother, I wasn't really aware, is also something that you really never get over. It's such a difficult issue to talk about.
On today's episode of The Resilience Project, I speak to Sir Geoff Hurst, one of the most iconic and legendary names in English history. As the man who scored a hat-trick in the 1966 World Cup final, which inspired England's men's team to the first and only time they've won the trophy, Sir Geoff shares some unbelievable ups and downs that you would not believe possible for a modern-day top-level footballer, which includes him being forced to claim unemployment benefits and then become a door-to-door salesman, much to the surprise of his potential customers. He also shares how he dealt with the unimaginable pain from more than one family tragedy and offers refreshingly honest, simple and inspiring advice that has kept him grounded and positive no matter what is going on around him. From being knighted by the Queen to signing on at the Dole office, Sir Geoff's humble and straightforward way of dealing with life's challenges will provide calm and clear direction for anyone to learn from, no matter what they're dealing with. Welcome to this episode of The Resilience Project, chatting with Sir Geoff Hurst. Sir Geoff, it's a real honour to have you on The Resilience Project. It probably won't surprise you if we start at Wembley Stadium on the 30th of July, 1966, England against West Germany in the Men's World Cup final. Of course, you scored a hat-trick to help England win 4-2, the only time England have ever won the Cup, and in fact, you're still the only man ever to score a hat-trick for the winning team.
It must express the winning team.
The winning
yes.
team. How much do you remember about what was going through your head during the game?
You remember lots of things. It's such an important game, not only for the country, for the players, but of course for me as well. I didn't start the tournament, so just being there and playing, so much I remember about the game and the goals, what I was thinking, what was being said, is very, very clear. After the game, it becomes a bit of a blur. In fact, you're almost sort of deflated in a way that you're on that high to represent your country, playing the World Cup final against a great side, Germany. When it finishes, you're sort of a little bit deflated. But really the enjoyment of winning a World Cup in your own country just simply lasts forever, because people still recount on the day and tell you, when they meet you occasionally, where they were on the day, exactly where they were, who they were with and what they were doing. Yeah. And those stories really never cease. And I think you then become aware. Yeah. You're not at the time, but you become aware of the magnitude of the occasion.
Yeah. Because it is one of those things like, where were you when they first went to space?
Yes, absolutely.
Where were you when Sir Geoff scored the hat-trick? You must hear some interesting stories.
Yes, it's I think the one that sticks out. Guy was on a ferry coming back into England and trying to listen to the extra time. And only one guy had a radio on it on one side of the ship, and everybody kept walking across from one side of the ship to the other to try and listen to the radio, and the captain had to tell him, don't get on one side, the ship's or the ferry's liable to capsize. So that's one that sticks out, which I find, of course, highly amusing.
Yeah. So in terms of trying to understand the preparation of a winner, can you describe what you did and how you prepared before the game, the morning of the game, the night before?
The training at Lilleshall was very intense and very, very hard. And there was no quarter given, even in the five-a-side games or the 11-a-side games, because those players all competed for their place in the team. But I think that you needed that kind of thing. If you're going to prepare for one of the biggest tournaments, the biggest tournament in the world, you've got to make sure that everybody is fit. So much credit must go to Alf Ramsey. He had honed his group of players. He picked you, A, because of your ability and your style of play fitted, and B, I think also your character and personality was also a very important issue. I think one thing he always used to say when he brought a new player into the squad, and he would always come up with probably a similar phrase. He said, "He will not let me down." And I think that was part of his management skills, was really so vitally important.
So it wasn't always the very best players available, it's the ones that would make a team work.
Absolutely, that sums it up. Jack Charlton's got a lovely story. He inquired, Alf, why are you picking me now? Jack wasn't picked till he was pushing 30, which is quite ancient, and played 700 games for Leeds. And Alf said, Jack, I don't always pick the best players. And that is just a fantastic line, which sums up, he picks players that can fit in, not necessarily the best left back, the best right winger from that club. He selected players that could work and play together and would have the right character as well.
So at the start of the 1966 World Cup, you were not first choice. For the benefit of people watching or listening that don't necessarily know football that well, you had Jimmy Greaves and Roger Hunt ahead of you. Now, Jimmy Greaves, as I understand it, had already scored over 300 goals in his career for his clubs and over 40 for England. So you'd think he's a natural first choice. You'd scored around 100, I think, in club football at West Ham, but had only scored, I think, your first goal for England before the World Cup itself.
Yes.
And Roger Hunt still holds the record as Liverpool's leading league goal scorer. So they were phenomenal kind of competition. So how did you have the mindset getting into that squad that you could maybe get into the team ahead of them? Or had you resigned yourself to being on the sidelines?
I hadn't resigned myself at all to be on the sidelines, but I wasn't necessarily disappointed when he started off the first game without me. I was quickly over that. In terms of how I felt, I'd only played a few games. For me, and sitting on the bench, my thoughts are just as clear as they were then. I was just absolutely thrilled to bits and happy to be in an England squad that's hosting a World Cup. And it was never, it could affect people negatively, not starting, but those are great players. And I was happy to be just in the squad of 22 players in England hosting a World Cup for the first time. So that can happen sometimes when people, not just in football, but in all walks of life, have a thing going against them. They lose their, whatever you want to say, their cool and misbehave and so on. And this is not just in football. This is a human nature. When something goes against you, you can lose it, and then your time will come. But then you're not ready when your time comes. Whereas for me, it was completely. I was happy to be there, and my time did come when Jimmy got injured, sadly.
Yeah, and I think there's actually a real lesson there that our listeners can take from that. If they're not where they want to be in their job or their career, or they're looking at other people who are ahead of them and allowing that to distract them, have you kind of got any advice on how you kept focusing on your own progress rather than being distracted by the two guys that were ahead of you?
Well, it is just focusing on what not to let any disappointment upset you too much, and continue and still believe your time will come. Yeah. They're the key things. And my wife we've been married 60 years this year, so she knows me fairly well. And she says about disappointments, I've been there a couple over the years, not just including that one. She said, I quickly move on. I don't harp on that disappointment. It's the past and we move on. That's how she sums me up. And probably that's a lot to do with my character. But of course, the advice I give to anybody who has a difficulty in their lives, in sport and so on, it moves on, life goes on, and you just get on with it. Yeah. And don't let any disappointment spoil what you've already done, and continue to fight to get in the team, or to get back in your job, or to do your job better and so on.
Sure. Now, you not only scored that hat-trick during England's most important game, but you scored, I think, somewhere near 300 goals in your career.
Yes.
So you know how to remain calm under pressure. So what can people kind of transfer from that experience into their own lives and career?
You've really just got to concentrate on where you are and what you're doing at the time. Don't let anything that's happened in the past be still around when a chance comes, or a chance in your career or life comes. Don't be thinking about the past. Move on. is what I say, but I think a lot of it has to do with your character.
Sure.
You're less affected by disappointments, which of course we all get in life.
Yeah.
If everybody must understand that most of us in our lives at some stage or other are faced with disappointments. And the success, there's so many great stories of people who face disappointments in all walks of life, have proved and become very successful in their businesses or films or in sport.
Yes, yes. So just 3 or 4 years, I think, before the World Cup, you were kind of playing cricket as well, is that right?
Yes.
And was there ever a point where you were thinking of quitting football for cricket?
It's madness when I look back, trying to go to do both cricket and football. I mean, when you consider cricket doesn't finish till September, West Ham and clubs are training from July. So finishing cricket, coming back to West Ham, probably now August, September. I've missed all pre-season. I'll come back, I'm not fit. I'm playing in reserves. This is around September, October 62. Come back to Chapel Heath one Monday morning. I played it in reserves against Shrewsbury or something. Still overweight, I missed all the training. Ron Greenwood came over to me and said, I thought I was going to get some kind of bollocking. He said, we're playing Liverpool tonight, which I knew, Monday night at Upton Park. And I was a midfield player then. People don't realise that sometimes I change positions. He said, I want to try you up front. And he's picking a player that's not fit, that's out of position. And amazingly, from a standing start, messing about with cricket, which I always put, I played 27 games, that's 62-63 season, and scored 14 goals.
Yeah.
Put me in, up front, bang.
Probably a lesson there, though, on people kind of focusing on their lane, really, not trying to spread themselves too much.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I think that is a lesson, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I should have been told by a more experienced person at the time, you should not be trying to combine the two. I mean, when you look back and analyse it.
So it's probably stereotypical to talk about 1966. I'm sure that's the main question. But you've obviously scored nearly 300 goals. You won an FA Cup, a European trophy, had an amazing career. Is there any point where you almost feel like your whole life achievements are overshadowed by one moment? Or is that a privilege?
Well, I think it's you can forget all the years I played, and people only talk about one game.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, very amusing. There's a bit more to my career and life than that. But when you're playing something as big and as important as that, they're bound to focus on that. So, yeah.
So it's not like your life you don't ever feel like your life's defined by one moment.
Life is not just sport, of course. It's family, and very, very important part of your life is your relationships with your family. In fact, over the years, probably it's more important.
Yeah.
I think probably in the early days of trying to make it at West Ham, because you had to be so correct on your training and your behaviour, and when you could have a holiday, which is only 2 weeks in July or something, the family side of it became almost second, which is wrong. But I think because that kind of trade, being in football, it was so important, that became the number one. Over the years, of course, I've become more sensible and realised that the family is far, far more important than any job of football. And so I was fortunate maybe to have a relationship with a wife who was unbelievably supportive of me just focusing in those 10 or 15 years on the sport. Like, it came before everything, which in a sense, probably if you want to achieve the top in that sport, probably it has to, to an extent.
So I probably shouldn't dare talk about my kind of mediocre football career compared to yours as a ref. But I do remember the first ever time I did a live Sky game, being in the tunnel, seeing the cameras and thinking, what am I doing here? They're going to find me out. How have I made it here? Did you ever have moments like that where you had that kind of imposter syndrome? You were questioning, how have I found myself here?
The only time I started to feel about my ability was towards the end of my career, when I generally felt then I wasn't quite strong enough, fit enough.
Sure.
I was injury free, but I felt because my game was fairly physical, that I felt I was just losing that little bit of edge. Whereas some players would have carried on until they're another year or two, have gone somewhere else, as they do. But in the middle of the season, when I was at West Brom in the final season of my career, I decided that halfway through the season I wasn't quite up to it. In fact, that's the best way of putting it. And I had a word with Johnny Giles, who was then the manager of West Brom, and said, I want to retire. I'm not actually at my best. I was aware that I wasn't physically as good as I should be. And I was fairly young, injury-free, 34 years of age. But then, and players would have gone on, but for me, I said, I've had enough. But I'd always said to myself many years earlier, if I ever felt the time came when I wasn't up to it, I was not getting there, then I would jack it in. And that's what I did in that around 76.
Brave decision. So you scored the hat-trick, you win the World Cup, you get the trophy from the Queen, there's 93,000 people watching, there's apparently 400 million people watching around the world. You become a hero to the nation, front pages of every newspaper. Is it true the next morning you were seen washing your car on your driveway?
A lot of people ask that question and can't actually believe it. So it is. I went home that night and did the thing I did Sunday morning. I did what I did every Sunday morning. I went home and cut the grass, cut the lawn, and washed my Austin 1100, grey Austin 1100. That was what you did.
Must have been fascinating for people walking past. He looks a bit like that Geoff Hurst.
People ask that question quite a bit, and they really can't believe it. They want me to tell. They don't believe it until they face me and say, "Is this true?" And that's exactly what it was.
I'm not sure it'd be true today, but there we go.
I don't think the players will if they win the Euros, will be in the next morning, washing their car and cutting the lawn.
If we can go back to 66 a moment, and Jimmy Greaves got injured, which gave you your opportunity. And I saw an interview with him where he said that he felt like the loneliest person in Wembley Stadium that day, and he wanted to go away on his own. Couldn't join the celebrations. As a friend and a colleague to him, how did you feel about that? Did you speak to him about it?
The answer is no. Jimmy and I had very... although I admired him as a person and as a great player, those things happening in sport. Somebody gets injured, somebody comes in, and we never discussed that. I never felt any real sorrow. I felt a bit for him when I hear what you just said, how he felt, and I can fully understand it. The greatest goal scorer we've had in this country by a country mile. Is absolutely astonishing. A genius, and there's no way I would have played had Jimmy not been injured. But there's never over the years. I met him. He came to West Ham, of course, in 1970. Played with him, appeared on a couple of his theatre shows and stuff, and never once did we ever touch on or discuss that thing. It changed both of our lives, really. But I do recall what Jimmy had said, which you quite rightly stated. He did feel. You can imagine, as great as he was, not to be part. It was unthinkable that England winning a World Cup, the great Jimmy Greaves, would not play. But it's part and parcel of the life. It was a nasty injury against France, very badly. Strangely enough, because we hadn't had any conversation, I'm never completely, even today, 100% sure whether or not he was fit to play in the final. I never really inquired. I wonder, was he fit to play? But what I did, of course, made it very difficult. I think probably, again, looking back, competing with those two players, looking back now, many years later, it seemed to me to be a better balance with me and Roger, or me and Jimmy, because they were both a wee bit short and not quite so physically in the air. But because of circumstances and the build-up, I didn't score, and he started off those two lads. But that seemed to be the better combination. But it's just crazy to think that Jimmy, the great Jimmy Greaves, and I can fully understand, knowing how he was, that he would have been absolutely so upset about it.
If I may throw a hypothetical scenario, which is that he somehow declares himself fit and you get dropped for the final and he plays, and maybe he goes on to score the hat-trick and everything else, do you think you would have felt the same?
Answering that question many years later, I probably think I would have been, having not started and then coming in and doing very well in the two games, of course, scoring really coming in and taking my chance as I did. scoring the winner against Argentina and then making the winner in the semi-final, I don't know, my character would say no, but I'm thinking today, I would have been absolutely gutted. Having been left out after winning 2 games and competing and scoring the winner and making the winner would have been really uptight. I think I'd have been the loneliest man on the field probably.
Yeah.
Had Jimmy, as much as I admired him as the greatest player, I think I would have been pretty upset.
Sure.
That's what I think. I don't know. I wouldn't have been happy.
No. So about a decade and a half later, about 15 years later after the final, you got into management. You ended up with Chelsea. That didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. Now, but one of the things I find fascinating about this is that after Chelsea, you kind of went away from football, I think, and became a door-to-door insurance salesman. Now, this must have taken some mindset and resilience to go from being the World Cup winner to kind of getting into the normal world.
Yes, I think at the time, those days, as much as you have a successful career in the sport, once you had finished, unlike today, if the players finish today with the money they get, they probably wouldn't have to start work the next day. In the medieval times, as I joke about, when we played, once you finished and managing, you have to go out and doing something else. I think what instrumentally was important for me, I found out after leaving football and going into this other world and doing a few things, speaking and knocking on doors, and that I found I could earn as good a living. So that was, with a wife and 3 daughters, earning money to support them is vitally important. So I think that was, and within a few weeks of realising I could earn a living outside of the game with insurance, with after dinner and stuff, speaking to my wife, it didn't take this long, only a week or 2 for me to decide then, or us to decide, that was it.
Yeah.
But it was interesting going into a new life, and there were people, knocking on doors. And my wife used to, where we lived in Surrey at the time, she pretended I had to go and sell insurance policies, so I knocked on my own front door, and she opened it, and I had to use my spiel that I was taught as an insurance salesman. Yeah. So we went through all that. Yeah. So,
I mean, that shows your dedication, though, that you actually
wanted
to get it right.
I just get on with it.
Yeah.
It was interesting about being recognised or not. One of the days this is in the insurance business relating to cars, extended warranty, and I went into a Ford dealership without an appointment. I went inside and had my card and gave it to the secretary. I said, "Can we speak to the boss?" It was in his office. And she said, "Okay." She took my card in there. After about 5 or 10 minutes, he came out with the card, and I'm sitting down, and this guy came behind, and he came, and my card, he threw the card, and it bounced on the table and bounced on the floor. And he said, "We don't deal with ex-footballers." Really? And that was that. I mean, but looking back, it's quite amusing. Yeah. And the other thing is, in the early days of selling insurance and having a script, one of the things you used to have to do was open a phone directory and make cold calls. Yeah. Just pick a random name in the book, pick it up, just make a call. We spent about a week on that kind of in a learning process. And one of the days I opened the book, picked somebody out, put the phone up, and there was a woman answered the phone. And I went through the spiel. "My name is Geoff Hurst. I work for this company, and we'd like to talk to you about da-da-da." And the woman said, "Sorry," she said, "I don't deal with this kind of business. My husband does, but I'll get him on the phone." So the husband comes on the phone. He said, "My wife tells me, I understand that you're Geoff Hurst." I said, "That's correct." He said, "If you're Geoff Hurst, I'm bloody Marilyn Monroe." And that was it.
Yeah, put the phone down.
Put the phone down.
Oh, hello. Sorry to interrupt. Look, it's just a quick favour. If you're enjoying this, which I guess you are if you're still listening, can you make sure you leave a review? That's all. Now, back to the podcast. So you must have got used to suffering rejection and then But you'd still get up the next day and
Oh, yes.
not think,
Yeah, yeah.
what am I doing this for?
Getting rejection as a cold calling insurance salesman is part and parcel of the life, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about the numbers again, it's just when you look back and thinking what you've done, and signing on the dole and during that time. But I guess in many respects it wasn't as much as it seems crazy now, and you think it was going to be quite difficult and quite hurtful. I can't think of any of that period of time, in discussion with my wife, I was anything less than positive about moving on and doing what I was doing. But I did do what a lot of people did who didn't have a job, sign on the dole. I think people will be quite surprised about this.
Yeah.
It's not something that's been mentioned a great deal. Yeah, move on. I mean, I know we talk about resilience and how your attitude is. I just think getting more deep into this, I think it's very much, and I've had all the negative things happen to me as much as anybody else has. But I can't say over the years looking back, and at the time, I actually felt absolutely destroyed or distraught about what was happening to me, particularly after having the high of playing for England in the World Cup final. As my wife says, I just get on with it.
I think a lot of people will learn a lot from just hearing that. I think that's a real lesson there.
Yeah. Well, that's what she says. She's saying that my character's that, and that's what the advice I probably give to people who have disappointments. Move on quickly. It will go. It does go. Don't let it stay there. Move on with your life and just push it to one side, because many people get disappointments in their life. It's not something that happens to that particular. You're not the only one that disappointments happen to. It happens to a lot of people, and you move on from it. And sometimes better, and sometimes better for it as well.
Yeah,
having got over a disappointment.
Definitely. Yeah, it's like failure is actually an inevitable part of success, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So obviously your managerial career didn't necessarily work out how you may have hoped. If you look at some of the great managers, say, whether it's Sir Alex Ferguson, Pep, Guardiola, Jose, or some of the ones you played under, is there any traits or leadership traits that you look at in them that you think, maybe I didn't quite have that?
A difficult question to ask. I don't suppose I stayed long enough in the business to really feel that. Whether, had I not moved on to do other things, whether I stayed in the game, whether I would have then begun to realise whether or not then I was not set up to be a manager. I think some people are, some people aren't. It's a difficult question to answer in that respect. I don't think there's any traits that I look with the great managers that I couldn't have had. It was just through circumstances, mainly, as I said, just through circumstances. I moved on because of the financial aspect. But certainly, what was the question? I never felt I had to get back into the game to then prove I could do it. There was never anything, well, maybe I should have another year or two, forget what I'm doing, try and get back in the game and see if I can make a go. But that was never for 1 second on my radar to do that. I'd moved on, and from a financial aspect, I was keeping the kids fed and the wife fed.
Yeah. Now, many sports people or celebrities or film stars who have an incredible high, like you had, they often end up going down perhaps the wrong path, whether it's drink, drugs, more destruction. You've kept yourself off that path. Any kind of advice on how you've done that?
It's such an important part of our life to keep yourself reasonably fit. You don't need to be a dietitian or a clinician to give people advice on what they should or shouldn't be doing. And it's quite evident that eating sensibly, sleeping sensibly, drinking sensibly, keeping yourself reasonably fit. I did find it quite surprising bumping into players many years later in a room where 10 or 15 years later in a room with various people, and somebody will spot out, see that guy over there, that's this player you played with and against and stuff. And they look quite big, facially, they've changed. And I found that quite surprising that players who played the game at the top level, almost once they finished playing, stopped. I found that very surprising. Something I've not for a second, so I've managed to. And it's not, listen, we all know what we should do. It's advice. You've got to keep yourself fit, doing something, whatever that fitness is. It's important for every person on the planet. We all know that, but some people don't adhere to those rules in terms of their diet or their activity or sleeping or the behaviour.
So who are the greatest leaders or mentors that you came across, and what kind of advice did you get from them that you think is worth sharing?
I'd always pick Bobby Moore out, my captain at West Ham. Although he was only 8 months older than me, he came across as being a very smart individual and how people saw him. He, in terms of his behaviour, he trained hard, always set a good example in the dressing room, and he had good qualities about leadership. He led, he never lost his rag. You see games today when they're fighting and scrapping. I can't remember in 500 games playing with him that he ever lost his rag. And obviously some of the biggest games in our cups and England winning the World Cup. So that always stuck. So I was never, in terms of any physical antagonisation against players who were trying to kick lumps out of me for 15 years, did I ever lose it? I'm not there to fight them. So I never got entangled at all with anybody, any of the tough defenders who were kicking me all over the place. Just focus and concentrate on what you're there for. If Bobby gave you a bollocking, he didn't rant and rave, he just raised his eyebrows, and I knew that was the that was being told whether I did was wrong, just by raising his eyebrows. And I think so that kind of behaviour did stick with me, and it had a big influence. And he's the best player I play with, both for West Ham and England.
Such a good example there of keeping focus on what you're doing rather than letting others distract you.
Absolutely, yes.
So you were knighted to become Sir Geoff in 1998. How did that feel?
It was a complete surprise when they initially phone you up and say you've been going to be knighted. Do you accept it? Is that okay? And so on. And they also said, well, keep it quiet now. This is just the initial phone call. It won't be announced for another month. And what I thought then at the time, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was an absolute joke. Quite frankly, I was completely surprised. It's not something that was ever on my radar to be knighted and the honours. Until a month's time when it's out and the journalists know and they're phoning you. And I think I remember taking the phone call in the morning from a journalist who wanted to interview me. And I had hardly any clothes on. I've run upstairs to my wife and said, it's true, I have been knighted. So it was a lovely day, a fantastic day where you can take members of your family. We had a very nice dinner that night at a lovely hotel in London with, 15 to 20 odd immediate family and friends. So very enjoyable. Got some lovely snaps of the family outside the Buckingham Palace. So it was a really lovely day. But really, I thought it was I seriously thought it was a joke.
And you've mixed with royalty and some of the most famous people in the world. How do you ensure that doesn't faze you?
Just try and be yourself. Don't get carried away with get too important, to become too important. Just try and be yourself in whoever you meet in any level. Just try and be yourself. People say, how do we address you? There are some knights out there we know who have categorically have to be called Sir whatever. I said, Jeff's fine.
You do seem very grounded for everything you've achieved. So how have you kind of dealt with that fame and kind of public attention?
It's a very easy answer. I have a wife. I've been married 60 years in October the 13th, and she has a large hammer and two very large nails, which keeps my feet on the floor. That's an easy answer.
Yeah.
And she is not a celebrity wife, and we are not a celebrity family. The kids and the grandchildren. My eldest granddaughter, she was with a girlfriend a few weeks ago in some function, and her girlfriend met this man and said, do you realise who this is? This is Geoff Hurst's granddaughter or whatever. And she shies away from it. She moaned about it. She likes to get very, very, very uncomfortable. And that's not just her, that's just how they all are. Yeah. My other daughters, My two daughters, we're just not a celebrity family at all. Yeah. And that's primarily down to my wife, who's, she's a good balance. You know, I'm publicly and my wife's a very private woman.
Sure. Now, on the subject of family, you lost your younger brother when he took his own life in his mid-20s. It's a very different world today, of course, with attitudes to mental health issues. Yeah. What advice would you give anyone who's suffering with their mental health right now?
It's such a difficult issue to talk about, or not to necessarily talk about, but to face, and how to understand. It's such an important. The good thing overall is that it's talked about a lot more, and certainly in the time my brother, I wasn't really aware. I didn't spend a lot of time. I'd moved out, so I wasn't really. He wasn't right, but I wouldn't think his behaviour was not outrageously crazy. I think he was out there, and it was an unbelievable shock to me when I found out that he committed suicide. But I think the great thing about it is now people talk about that. That is a gigantic step forward. It's talked about on a regular basis that people can face this. My advice is to talk to people about it, talk to family, friends, put it out there so you're not alone trying to deal with that innermost feeling yourself.
And very sadly, you've suffered other grief, obviously, with the terribly sad loss of your daughter in 2010. And of course, all your teammates from the England team. You are, as I understand, the only surviving member of that team. You seem a very positive guy. How do you keep yourself so positive?
Well, it's very sad when every time I look at a picture of the team now, either all of us or a few of us are doing something. Very sad that these players you grew up with and achieved so much with. And of course, losing your daughter with a brain tumour is also something that you really never get over. You just don't get over it. It happens. It's talked about from time to time. Life does move on, but it's something you never forget, particularly in your own family. And going through what she went through almost lived with it for about 15 years, quite remarkably. So, it's something strange enough at the time for years I didn't talk about. I wouldn't, people talk about things. It's not something I don't go to the burial. I didn't talk, if it came up with about family and daughters and that stuff, I never ever touched on the fact that she passed away. Over the years, I've learned to grow with it and live with it. And when people bring the subject up now, I would initially say about family. I lost my daughter in 2010. But for years I just wouldn't. It's getting back to talking about it. I think is part of the healing process to an extent. It's something I just didn't want to get even remotely mention when it came up in conversations. But nowadays it's the first thing I mention. So it's tough. It happens to a lot of people, and it's something you never quite really get over it. Every time something crops up, you see a picture indoors or somebody mentions a name, it brings it back sometimes all too vividly.
So what advice would you give to youngsters that are watching this who want to be the best in their space, whether that's sports or business or any other avenue?
It's just concentrate, focus on that. Don't have any other distractions. You want to achieve something in your life, you've got to focus on that. And don't get distracted by anything else that's happening around you. And sometimes sacrifice other things you may be interested in or not. You can't do everything. Focus on the most important things at that time.
Yeah. So how would you define resilience? And do you have like a personal story that you can share that kind of exemplifies that trait?
It is such an important word and important feeling on not letting distractions move you away from where you want to focus. It is quite, I think the definition to an extent is very much, in my own opinion, is what you're like as a person to be able to deal with it. Some people have that ability to be resilient, don't let anything distract them from what they want to do. So it's such an important word, and how you can be successful when things go against you, as they do in all our lives. But I think you can get advice. I think it's important. Like, you're looking to advice of people who can help you along the difficult journey that we all have at some time in our lives. Nobody's in this earth, I think, you can say, everything's gone great for us or great for me or great for the family. There's never been any issues along the way. It doesn't happen. Well, strange enough, many, many, many years ago, I knew a couple of people, and they always used to talk about how wonderful their lives were, and nothing ever went wrong. And I always found that quite strange.
Yeah.
Sticks in my mind. We're going back, in the early 20s or 30s, where we knew this couple, and they said everything was great.
Yeah.
Nothing had gone wrong, and I that was weird.
That was your early 20s,
early 20s,
not the 90s.
No, not the 1920s. No, I'm not that old.
No. So I think that would be good advice for anyone listening who's not feeling like things are going their way at the moment, just about digging deep. And
absolutely, yes, because they will pass. It will pass. These things do not last forever. That's on all the stuff I've talked about today, which have been difficult times. They don't last forever. You move on, and that is the key thing. This feeling I feel, the things that are going against me, does not last forever. And try and be resilient and cope with life, which throws at you all these ups and downs.
Yeah. So what message would you hope that people take away from your experiences and your journey?
I think you can be successful. You've done it as a player. I wasn't the best player around, but you can be a success in your business with the right attitude and dedication and behaviour. And focusing on that. It doesn't always go smoothly. I'm a good example. I wasn't a Jimmy Greaves or a Bobby Charlton. I mean, in my career, they are the giants. They are the unbelievable ability. I admire ability with our world-class players, those two particularly, and Bobby Moore. I wasn't in their category, but I had enough ability and a dedication and to make a success, with not being, in terms of ability, as good as those great players. They were unbelievable in our team, but I still finished up in the same team and contributing as much as they did. Yeah,
sounds like your dedication made up for what you lacked.
Oh, absolutely. I think certainly in life you have to be dedicated. If any particular field, certainly in football you had to be dedicated. You couldn't afford to be lax in discipline and still expect to be, and we have seen in football players who I would say arguably would have better ability than me that didn't make it because the other side of their lives and characters, that they weren't quite as disciplined. What I would argue, and I think I'd probably argue that go back in '66, there were players I thought would be in the England team just about the time I was getting in there. Players I thought maybe would have been in the side, and maybe. I found out later that their attitude wasn't, from Alfred Ramsey's perspective, wasn't what he expected. Who I felt technically, in terms of pure ability, I would argue they were better footballers than I was. But the rest of it, they didn't have.
Yeah, I think that's a real example, a great example people will take away, to be honest. 100 years' time from now, how would you like history and people to describe Sir Geoff Hurst, the man, and his approach to life?
Well, I think for describing me, I'd be happy if they remembered me. The simple answer is still remembered for the only guy that scored a hat-trick in a winning World Cup final. I'll be disappointed saying that because I do hope the England team can win another trophy before the next 100 years. We've had 60 years, so I'm an England fan, same as all England fans, and nothing would please me more if England were to win the Euros or be the World Cup coming up. I don't want to wait another. I'm an English fan, so I do hope we're not waiting another. And people are not talking about me in 100 years' time, so still the only person who's scored a hat-trick in a winning World Cup. I hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah. And last thing, and we can't not mention this, was it over the line?
Well over. Had we had VAR today, it would prove quite conclusively. It is the most question, of course, I get. Nothing's proved. Technically, scientists have looked at this from both sides. Some have said it was in, some have said it was not. I think in terms of the game itself, the pleasing aspect was a great German side. I think pleasing aspect on the day we were the better team. I've never not many people know this, but in the Germans' equaliser in 90 minutes did in fact brush a German player. The moment when the ball was crossed for the German to score, it actually hit another German's arm, and the picture is almost with the ball underneath the German's arm, almost like it's holding it. And it proved that slowed the ball down to get Weber, who scored the goal. So I think they were very lucky in getting an equaliser. Yeah. But it did me a favour, of course. So
did you a real favour?
It did me a real favour, so I'm not complaining about that.
Do you ever wake up in a cold sweat about the fact, like maybe if that Russian, or I think it was Azerbaijan, linesman had decided it didn't go over the line?
I think we still would have won if we found another way to score. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? You mentioned we thought at the time he was Russian. Of course, we know obviously with greater intelligence and knowledge that he was from Azerbaijan. I often wonder when the Swiss referee Dienst went across to Bakhmarov and consulted him, sprinted about 50 yards to the touchline, and neither spoke a common language, so God knows what they were talking about. Quite amusing. I talk about that when I do talk to people, that amusing moment. So yes, but it wouldn't have mattered. I think we deserved to win on the day, but it's interesting, as all big games, you have a superb talking point, and that was one of the biggest talking points we have seen in world football.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as the saying goes, they think it's all over, and of course, it is now.
It's not yet. I'm still here.
No, I mean, this podcast. But Sir Geoff Hurst, it has been a real honour to spend this time with you. You are, of course, responsible for giving this country and so many people, so much joy and inspiration and great memories. And you shared some wonderful insights that I think will help people in their lives and careers, no matter what their background is.
I hope I've given some insight into how you can be successful.
Yeah, and with such humility as well.
Thank you.
So thank you for being a guest on the Resilience Project.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good to talk about it.
Thanks for listening to the Resilience Project. Make sure you're subscribed for notifications with your favourite podcast platform so you find out first when the next one is released. For other news and updates, you can register with me directly at weslinden.com/podcast.